The Democratic candidates came out swinging during their final debate before the Iowa caucuses. Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders battled over Wall Street, health care, and guns, while Martin O'Malley at times struggled to get a word in.
So we are joined now by senior political editor Steve Chigueras and political contributor Lynda Tran. You are both in Washington. Let us talk about this debate. Steve, I'm going to start with you. We are just 2 weeks away from the Iowa caucuses. So what stood out to you in terms of the candidates' performances?
Well, first, just the aggressiveness between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. I think it really shows where the race is at this point. It's neck and neck in Iowa and New Hampshire. I'm sure that the Clinton folks did not think they'd be in this situation this late in the game, and you saw her sort of aggressively going after Bernie Sanders on the gun issue, on health care, and Bernie Sanders in retaliation going hard on her on Wall Street. And so it was a pretty explosive night. They were both very aggressive. It was very interesting to watch.
Lynda, given that aggressive tone, what is your impression? Do you think that either candidate did enough to sway voters in Iowa?
Look, I think that it was very spirited but substantive, and as Steve points out, the tone really did shift in this debate as compared to the previous ones. But I think the bottom line is that both of the two front runners here really shored up their support, but neither of them ceded ground. I think what that translates to is a real nail-biter in Iowa, where you still have somewhere around 14% of voters undecided. That said, once you get past Iowa, once you get past New Hampshire, I think the fact that there hasn't been a big shift in terms of their base of support is probably problematic in places like South Carolina, where there are fewer undecided voters.
So one of the topics that the candidates really got heated over, really aggressive over, was health care. Let's take a listen, then we want to talk to you guys about what we heard.
We have the Affordable Care Act. That is one of the greatest accomplishments of President Obama, of the Democratic Party, and of our country. Now, there are things we can do to improve it, but to tear it up and start over again, pushing our country back into that kind of a contentious debate, I think is the wrong direction.
I have to talk about something that's actually working in our state.
No one is tearing this up. We're going to go forward. But what the Secretary neglected to mention, not just the 29 million still have no health insurance, that even more are underinsured with huge co-payments and deductibles. Tell me why we are spending almost 3 times more than the British, who guarantee health care to all of their people.
So the two candidates initially were sort of struggling to show that they were of different minds on this particular topic. This is the stand that Hillary Clinton has seemed to have taken in the week leading up to this debate. Steve, who do you think came out stronger on health care?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see. This is the fight that there's sort of that Hillary Clinton has sort of laid out for Democrats in Iowa and New Hampshire. The fight is, do you want to, as a party, evolve with what the president has already started, whether it's Obamacare or some of the other things that he's accomplished as president, or do you want somebody like Bernie Sanders, who's going to, in her words, blow things up, tear things apart? Revolution is the word he likes to use. So do you want to sort of stay the course and build, or do you want a revolution? That's the question that Iowa and New Hampshire Democrats are going to have to answer, and that's the question she's sort of laying out for them.
Let's talk about the Republicans. Ted Cruz has doubled down on criticism of Donald Trump's so-called New York values, and Trump has called Cruz nasty and a hypocrite. Lynda, when you look at the big picture here, what is really the lasting impact of these attacks?
You know, I think it's actually kind of a shame. You know, what the exchange on the Republican side really highlights is that there's a lack of substance there. It is very divisive rhetoric. It's a very divisive conversation. And frankly, it's not speaking to the things that everyday, ordinary Americans really care about. So rather than talking about their solutions for the country, how they're going to take the nation forward, they're focused on personal attacks. And frankly, that's not something that you saw last night in the Democratic debate, and that's a real contrast.
So, Steve, you know, you have Cruz and you have Trump sort of going at it, and then you have the establishment candidates that are battling it out to become an alternative to Trump and Cruz. You have Marco Rubio, John Kasich, Chris Christie, Jeb Bush. But what do they need to do to stand out before Iowa? Is it going to be all about their ground game?
It's going to be ground game. It's going to be, I mean, some of them may have even just sort of written off Iowa at this point. Bush and Kasich just aren't really competing there that much. I mean, New Hampshire is probably going to be the place for one of those four to shine. You know, there's a battle for third place in Iowa, but Ben Carson's also part of that battle in Iowa. So I think, you know, they turn their attention to New Hampshire. You look at Rubio and Bush and Kasich and Christie, and it's really who can make the sell to the moderate and less conservative thinking Republicans. And can they get some momentum coming out of New Hampshire? I think the sense is that Trump's going to do well there. And so it's about blunting sort of Trump's momentum out of New Hampshire and trying to blunt Cruz's momentum out of Iowa. What are they going to do? It's ground game. It's talking to voters and trying to convince them that Cruz and Trump are not the right people to put up as the nominee for the party.
Steve Chigueras and Lynda Tran, thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.